The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. So I'd like to welcome everybody here to our stream. I'd like to welcome all of our podcast listeners as well to the Break Sec, which is our semi-regularly now. I wanted to say weekly, but I can't really say that. Podcast about information security, cool stuff, regulatory compliance, and we're going to talk a little bit about Android app hacking today. So before we get started, and thank you, Robert, for being patient, I'd like to thank Tantalum Benturong, I think, for subscribing. I appreciate that, and for the follow. As a kind reminder, you can, in fact, do your Amazon Prime subscription for a free subscription to us every month if you'd like. If you don't want to pay for a regular subscription, you just have to remind yourself to renew it every month. So, but yeah, I appreciate the patience there. Robert, thank you for joining me today on the stream. I haven't done a lot of these like this because it is actually kind of difficult to get people to come on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon Pacific time. So I'd like to go ahead and get started by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into InfoSec or, Android app hacking. So, yeah.
Sure. I mean, it's like all of us back in the day kind of started out, fixing games, hacking games, making games work, and rolling into like making your own antivirus and writing sort of kind of scripts to bat scripts, and really just got my first start with like your basic IT job, run of the mill, rolled into more kind of small business networking, kind of got my feet wet with networking and realized I wasn't really interested in the networking and firewall stuff, and kind of quickly rolled into more web-based things and found out I had a knack for figuring stuff out and making stuff do silly things like a lot of us, and just constantly trying to learn something new and make automation, anything automate, and like to make things easily accessible by people. So I'm pretty big in the Unix Linux world, but I also try to make easy Windows stuff. So I've been getting a lot more into PowerShell and less into Bash and shell scripting, trying to focus kind of more on what can I do on endpoints because they're all Windows, and trying to roll a lot of automation and doing crazy stuff with PowerShell that you're not really supposed to do, that ends up bypassing EDRs unintentionally or intentionally, because we all need to do our jobs. So
right, yeah, no, that's cool. I missed that part of the career. I never did the SOC analyst stuff, or threat hunting wasn't what I would consider a thing much until later on in my career, and I never got to enjoy a lot of what what do you enjoy what you're doing? Is it something that gives you joy? What motivates you in that arena?
Yeah, it's the learning new stuff and making things do do things that they're not kind of traditionally supposed to do. And when you tell somebody, hey, why are you doing that? That's not supposed to do that? That's my favorite response is,
right.
Well, it's not supposed to do that. Okay, well, you said you had these security controls in place, and you said that we are doing these things. Let's test a few out. So anything from old school physical security stuff to remote shells, and waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and then going to sleep and doing like 24-hour testing globally, for off hours testing, and the old sitting in the dark at some SOC somewhere, or a lot of times I'd work nights, and the motion sensors would go off as you're sitting there, and you'd scare the crap out of the security guy as he's walking by. So my latest invention was one of the water birds that I put in front of the motion sensors, because where the cubes are, the light is constantly going on and off. So I got a water bird, and after about a day of messing around with them, I got him in the right spot, so he would always keep the lights on, because nobody comes into the office anymore. So I take
Nice.
Monday, Tuesdays. But yeah, it's just learning stuff, passion, teaching people things they want to learn, and finding new things to play around with. So, but yeah, the SOC sites within the past 5 years, and mostly I was, vulnerability assessments, pen testing, all the fun stuff, doing
Okay.
consulting for KPMG. So that was a
Nice.
fair amount of fun. But I don't necessarily miss the travel like a lot of us do. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't miss the travel, even though I'm actually gonna be in San Diego the weekend of the October 20th for B-Side San Diego.
Yeah, that's fun stuff.
Yeah,
It's a good reason to be out of town.
It is a good reason to be out of town. I've never been to B-Side San Diego before. Didn't even know it existed, and apparently it's been around for about 10 to 15 years. When I lived down in San Diego in 2009, it might have been nice to know that there was an InfoSec community, but I wasn't really plugged in to networking and stuff at that time. So, but yeah, I don't miss the travel so much. I was a consultant for, I don't know, a few years. So thankfully I didn't have to do any of that. But yeah, I'm kind of glad that I don't have the boasting of platinum membership in an airline, or
they have the
yeah.
seat carved out and the chair butt seat carved out and for you. Yeah,
exactly.
No,
The captain comes back and captain comes back and welcomes you onto the plane because you have like Uber status or whatever. Yeah.
No, I'd roll in at about 10 o'clock, 11 on Monday, and then if I'm lucky, I'd be in a Uber on the way back to Atlanta by Thursday, sometimes Wednesday. So
wow. Okay.
I'll get some kind of an access or something pivoting through, and then as I'm like pilfering and writing and logging all my data, then I'm like poking my flight to go home. So as I'm on my way to the airport, I'm like, yeah, I popped all your stuff, I'm ready to come home. So I do miss some of that aspect of it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to shut my door real quick, but if you'd like to discuss a little bit about why you're here and what we're going to talk about, I can, I'll be back in about 15 seconds. So would you like to maybe talk to people about what you're going to be doing with us today?
Sure. So we're going to kind of field what the general idea is of this is make it start about 10, 15 years ago with, when Android and iOS kind of rooting was, and it's kind of still popular, but it was a lot of people having to root their phones and do all kinds of crazy things to get root access. And then once you got root access, you had different ROMs, and that whole Android ecosystem is, a dumpster fire anyways. And having to navigate those waters is not always fun. Right. And just, I had one old iOS Apple tablet, and I managed to get it rooted and have everything happy. And then my son, who was like 3 years old at the time or something, like ended up hitting the update button. So I ended up losing my Apple device for testing if I wanted to do playing around with some iOS stuff. But yeah, it's just such a complicated environment. And we talked before we started that setting up Android Studio or having Android hardware is difficult, and getting that whole thing to work and getting it recognized and getting it to show up. And a lot of the battle is just getting the thing to actually register that you can talk to it. And then you got to start worrying about root detection and SSL pinning, which we'll kind of talk about. But that's the whole idea, is to replace those god awful things. Like, I don't know if you've ever run Nox or BlueStacks or any of those. You can't do test work stuff with those. So the people that do it for a living, I'm sure they're all great and they're doing whatever they do, and I don't know how they do it, because without actual hardware or some kind of wackadoo emulator, I don't know how some of these folks are doing it. But the idea here is to kind of start piecing together different aspects of the Android testing ecosystem and environment, and try to make that all easy to do, and easy to at least inspect the traffic with an Android device. So it's a lot of moving parts to test all that.
That makes sense. When I was working at Leviathan, a couple of my folks, hey Tim Hey, Tim, you probably won't see this, Tim, but Tim was one of our mobile app tester folks, and he had a couple of iDevices. You don't have to necessarily have an iPhone. I think we had a couple of iPods. I think we had an old iPhone 8 or 9 or something like that. But yeah, it was very much like once you get it jailbroken, don't run updates. Don't connect it to iTunes or anything like that. Don't force the updates. Always be waiting for the next jailbreak or kernel exploit to be able to push that things through. So in terms of mobile hacking, I used to buy phones based on how easy it was to jailbreak them. So I had like an LG G6 or LG G7. I bought several Samsung devices back in the day. The holy grail on XDA forums was like click to root kind of thing. One click to root. Yep. You just sideload the APK and then, install, and then sue happens. And before I went more legit with a Pixel, Magisk was like the big thing to do bypasses. And, Pokemon Go pretty much killed jailbreaking for me because it has safety net. So I guess Google has something called safety net that it used to, safety net to detect bypasses. Because ideally, apparently, some Pokemon Go or Ingress folks is what the two games that I played, they would spoof GPS. If they had the ability to do that. So they started leveraging things like Safety Net Plus, I think, as well. But yeah, Knox was another one, the fuses that you can blow in those to, brick your phone effectively, I think. But yeah, once for me, it was the, Barbie Golf apps or the other garbageware that was installed on the phones that actually didn't do anything other than give the companies value, and they say we saved money by doing so, but the prices weren't going to be any different doing so. I wanted a more pure ASOP experience on my phone, or some way of tweaking the kernel or futzing with power settings to get myself another 5 hours of battery or something like that. I remember playing with the original Galaxy Nexus, which was the first 4G phone that came out, had like a 2-hour battery. So
that's just something, some app went squirrely and is like eating itself in a loop, which I've had phones melt in my pocket before because I'm like, what is going on? Why so hot?
I mean, I could sit here watching it going 79, 78. 77, and I was like, oh my god.
That's when you open up the the ADB debug and just watch it scroll across and see what the hell's going on. Last experience I had with that was the Maz client for our work phones was in an endless loop and just eating CPU, whatever it was doing, and ended up wiping the settings for that. But there's always something with the Android stuff.
And it's a weapon. It's an arms race. It's an arms race, right? Every time they come out with a detection for Magisk Teams comes out with something that gets around the detections. Bloodbound, of course, in our chat window here said, it's illegal to emulate iOS, but there are ways to do it. And things like Fortnite, of course, won't work on iPhones if you've got them jailbroken either. Kind of sucks.
Wow.
But there's a ton of things. But so I think my biggest question, because I don't use Apple, and I had an iPod for a while just for work-based stuff. But are there any major differences between testing the Android version of the app versus the iPhone version of the app before we get started?
They all, as far as I know, I mean, it's probably been legit 10 years since I've done it on the iOS side. But as far as I know, they all end up using the same magical API. So the whole weird thing is like your bank, you can go to bankofamerica.com and sniff all the traffic in the browser and do whatever you want, fuzz whatever you want. But you download the bank app on your phone and it's siphoning out all your personal information, but you can't see the traffic. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. And then even worse, there's these magical APIs that get called by the apps that don't exist on the web, and you wouldn't know they were there unless you had inside information or you're inspecting the traffic. So what ends up happening is you see these magical functions that weren't there with the regular web app, and as a lot of these web apps are just front ends for some kind of API or just front end for a website that has a different style sheet or something. But most of the time you'll find some wackadoo API that's not there, and you're like, huh, that's weird. We don't even need like MFA, or there's CAPTCHA here, but when we use the app, we use a special API and we can get a token. So cool, we just bypassed authentication, or bypassed CAPTCHA by using essentially their own app against themselves. So it's weird.
Yeah.
The security through obscurity piece of it is what kind of drives me, and you can kind of easily figure all that stuff out. But I mean, how many people do you know? What percentage do we think? I mean, this is kind of a chat or a question for the channel, is what percentage of like pen testers do we think actually even have any reasonable skills to even test iOS and Android? Or is it its own specific thing, and it's like the 10% of the 10% of pen testers, or the 1% of the 10% of the pen testers? Like, I don't know. I can count on my fingers how many web app, mobile application testers that I know. Like maybe 5 if you put a gun to my head. But then I can talk to pen testers that are writing O-Day and reverse engineering stuff, and you ask them about iOS or Android, they're like, I don't know, that's complicated. Like, and I just don't know what how bad it is, right?
Yeah. And please, Bloodbound, anybody in our chat, please feel free to speak up if you've done mobile app testing. But, I've, when I worked, like I said, my experiences with Leviathan Security, but we did a lot of web app pen testing and mobile pen. There was more than a bit of mobile pen testing, and we tried to cross train as much as possible. The majority of it was, Android or iOS. We often actually tested both if there was an app for both of them, just because there are some, and again, it's all magic for me. I was just a PM. I didn't, delve too deeply into this, but there were some sort of differences in terms of how everything worked. Like if it was a progressive web app versus a mobile app, sometimes the things you download in the app stores are not really applications. They're like a fancy ass web page that just shows up with a wrapper or something like that. Sometimes we checked for things like cert pinning and what have you, which often causes more problems than it's actually useful for. But yeah, we had certain tests that we did for engagements at great. Well, there goes I don't know why my camera died on me, but there it is. Well, at least it came back. But yeah, we had different testing mechanisms and things that we had to use for test cases to prove due diligence on the apps, looking for those things. So, but yeah, I would say we probably had about 10 to 15% of our team at Leviathan out of about maybe 30 people, 40 people that knew how to do mobile pen testing. But yeah, it's not a huge group of people, and it's very, I wouldn't say super specialized, but it's, it definitely, it is a unique skill. So
I think, yeah, it's a subset of that whole thing.
Yeah.
And every, most technology people want control of their devices. And that's the only reason I kind of fell into that whole space, is because, like, I don't want 50,000 apps that start with Samsung on my phone.
Yep.
Nor do I want whatever T-Mobile or my provider. So you have the carrier apps, and then you have the actual phone provider apps. And I tried to create a script that would actually get rid of all of the bloatware I took all the bloatware from like XDA, and I made a master list. It was like, I don't know, 800 different apps. Yeah, it just ends up bricking your phone because it tries to forcefully uninstall and like freeze sort of some of those applications. And the 2 times that I've run it on a phone, it bricked my work phone and it bricked some other phone. It's basically I had to reset it. But the idea was to try to make a master uninstaller that would just like trash all that stuff. Yep. But I ended up with a list of stuff that I don't know whether or not it's going to make the phone reboot loop if I remove it or not. So there's not a whole lot you can do in that space.
I remember Titanium Backup was one of my favorite things to use. And what was the oh crap. It was the system. It was like a backup system that you could use to make backups of your ROMs that you could recover from. Anyway,
the twerp,
twerp.
whatever.
Yes,
Twerp,
twerp.
yep, the
Yes,
twerp
yeah,
stuff. Yep.
yeah. That
Yeah,
was
there's
awesome
actually an
stuff.
old
Yeah.
depreciated ADB call that you can. It's called like something something, and it'll do like a legacy style backup, and it'll actually pull down your apps and stuff, which is kind of nice if you end up
Nice.
blowing your phone away. You don't
Yep.
need some bloated Samsung app, and that's just going to crash. It just straight up like dumps the APKs out into a folder, and it
Hmm.
allows you to kind of restore them. I don't even know what percentage of data it does, but it's better than nothing when you have 50 apps on your phone.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing that I enjoyed using was auto run. Like I had one called Auto Run Manager because I would get into my car, and the minute it would, like, it was just annoying little things that would run on startup, and or when an event happened, and the idea was the Auto Run Manager, there were events that you could actually stop from running when you're root, like the second it connects to your Bluetooth in your car, it starts the last thing that was playing on the system. And it's like, sometimes I don't want to hear death metal at 11 on my speakers when it comes in, or I was watching a YouTube video and all of a sudden somebody's
Replays
hearing,
when you plug back in.
super annoying. So yeah, jailbreaking is not a bad thing in my opinion. It's just I wish they would allow the user to have more control over those auto run functions and to be able to modify the kernel or power savings or what have you. So, but yeah, yeah. Let me see. So yeah, I think we probably can start with setup. What does it take to actually set up an environment if you wanted to get into jailbreaking? I'm imagining we don't want to try it on our brand new Pixel 7 Pros or whatever. We want to maybe try with an older system first, or maybe do some research ahead of time.
Yeah, I mean, just like you said, the XDA folks. I mean, last time I've rooted a phone was probably 3 years ago. You get to the point where you get a new phone every year anyways. So by the time you root it and whatever, it's okay. I dropped it on the floor, or I changed jobs, or whatever.
Right.
And I can't. You get old. You can't keep up. And also, I mean, I have a quick story where I had a manager that I was supposed to meet at another hotel on site. And I was supposed to pick him up, or he was supposed to pick me up. And this is like the peak of, everybody was rooting their phones and doing different ROMs. And I'm sitting there like an idiot. Like, I had essentially taken the ID of one phone and like smashed it into the other. And I was kind of running two of the same Google IDs. And apparently that's something that's not desirable, because they both started like trying to be the same phone. And it basically made everything crash. So I'm like an idiot. I go down to the hotel lobby, and I have two perfectly good cell phones in my hand, one work and one personal. And walk up to the lady. I'm like frantically, I'm like, at this point, I'm like 10 minutes late to pick my manager up. I'm like, can I borrow your phone? And she's like, what? You're an idiot. You're holding two phones. I'm like, no, these are Androids. They're rooted. It's different. Like, they don't actually work as phones. Then that you get to that space where, the sound's always weird, or like some radio update needs to happen, or you get downgraded to, because of the whole ecosystem of the whole, the whole 5G and 4G and the LTE, voice over LTE broke everybody's phones that had rooted stuff. And it's like, it was a pain. I'm like, why did my phone stop working? And they're like, voice over LTE, you have to buy one of these 4 phones. I'm like, that's not the thing you can do. Are you allowed to do that? So yeah, we're on Mint with my wife, and then I use my work phone as just hook it up to Google Voice and do whatever through it. We have the work profile and 0 and 9, which is the Android stuff. But yeah, it's building that environment out. Find an old phone. This is, if I need hardware, I use my wife's old, whatever this is, some kind of Moto Play.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's Oreo, which is too old to do anything. So I can't really test much of anything on hardware wise. And that's the great thing about this Android 11 is it lets you do the ARM emulation quickly with x86, and I don't know how the magic up into how that works, but once I figured that out, I was like, wow, I can run like full-blown games or applications and it not take 10 times longer to load. So that's a big reason why I stepped into it. I was like, wow, I wanted this 10 years ago without having to actually emulate ARM. I mean, there's hiccups and stuff with all that, but like any of the apps, there's always something you have to work around. But yeah, it's just doing the whole Knox thing. If you want to try it, whatever. But I was not going to use that for work stuff, and that's why I started this project, was to, if I wanted to actually test a work app, I could, and I wouldn't have to necessarily worry about, running Knox or any of those BlueStacks or any of those god awful emulators. So I don't know what they do, what y'all did at Leviathan, but you'd have to use pretty much hardware at that point, because some of these developers, either intentionally to make it smaller or intentionally to be obscure, they only compile, when they compile out, they don't give you the x86, they give you only the ARM, and you have to either have hardware or emulate it. So there's not a whole lot you can do in some of those instances. But the Android 11 stuff lets you actually run the ARM stuff a lot faster.
Yeah, we just, I think our guys were our folks were very, very vanilla about it. It was ADB debug, ADB bridge to the different devices, hooked it up with a USB. Tim and some of the other crew who were remote were probably doing it a little differently, but yeah, it was. We tried to keep it as I don't know, as in a lab environment as possible, because the idea was we're testing an app. If you go, well, we didn't actually test this on a handset, we tested it on BlueStacks, which is doing XYZ, and we had to figure out a way to proxy things. So I believe we were using ADB and proxying the traffic through something like Burp Suite or what have you to make it happen. Some of the emulator stacks that I see, and some that I have downloaded because I was like, hey, I maybe want to try, playing around with web apps too. They don't have the ability to proxy traffic through anything. Some of the ones that I had looked up, not just BlueStacks, but Ginny
Motion thing.
Yeah, Ginny Motion.
Those are all they're all gross. Like all of them.
Yeah, and they make my laptop sound like a freight train whenever I've got them running, even in emulation mode. So not all of them will actually proxy traffic. So you have to use something like a Linux instance with like proxy chains or something like that to isolate that VM or isolate that instance, so that all of the traffic, which means you're getting all the other junk that's coming through, Firefox and update all your apps and all this stuff, is going through your proxy as well. So it takes additional filtering. So. But yeah, enough about reminiscing about the old times. I'd love to find out how you're doing this and how others can benefit from this system, if it's possible. And I'd like to thank, while we're getting the screen shares set up, I'd like to thank Clam Security for subscribing to our stream here. 3 months, pretty awesome. Thank you for that. And DFSec for following us here on Twitch. So very much appreciated. Tell your friends, and thank you so much, Bloodbound, for joining us as well. So, and anyone else, say hey if you're online. We'd love to have you. So yeah, operators asking for more testers. So feel free to
I'm trying
follow
to
along.
Get you the link to the thing. And
did you send that to me on? I think you might have given it to our Discord
as
well.
Twitch.
So. Okay.
Yeah.
I see it. Yeah.
I put it on a Reddit post and it got removed, and I thought, that's weird.
What?
I posted again on it was that Red Team Sec, which doesn't have a ton of people on it. And I posted it again, and I was like, hey, if the moderators remove it, can somebody tell me why? Yeah. And it got removed again. So I got on their Discord and I was like, hey, what's up? My thing got removed. Wanted some explanation. And then finally somebody replied back and said it wasn't related to red teaming. And I was like, what? It's literally like objection and Frida is like literally like in the title. Objection is in the title of like the URL. Like I guess I'm not explaining and communicating effectively, which, I have a problem with in general sometimes. But yeah.
Really
if you
weird.
want, I can kind of start sharing my screen and
yes, please,
and go from there. Where is my? I have my resolution pretty high, so it should help with folks on tiny screens.
Yeah, buddy. Oh, backwards. Yeah. I went to full screen. Let me shrink it down a little bit here. I don't know why I have it set to go full Monty here, but all right, so that works. See if I can make it a little bit bigger. All right, so yeah,
Zoom,
there we go.
Enhance.
Enhance.
Zoom, enhance. Is the CSI?
I was thinking more Super Troopers, but yeah, that'll work too.
Yeah, I think that's where that came from. Was one of those CSI type of shows. They're always like a blurry license plate, and then somehow they can zoom in.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea of this is I wanted to see if Android testing got easier.
Okay.
And I started out with, of course, the Android Studio. Started clicking around in there, trying to figure out how that whole thing works, building that out. And I managed to get it running, and then I managed to kind of fumble my way through getting root, and then trying to say, okay, well, how can I make this process easier? Accepting licenses, building up the environment, all the proper environment variables, and all that good stuff. So essentially, that's what I started to build, and inevitably ended up being a big PowerShell script, which is not huge, and it's not good code. It's got some really cool tricks in there. But it's not great code. So I wouldn't call myself a developer or even a scripter in that regard. But the whole idea is that this will build you very, very, very quickly a portable, in theory, a portable environment to test Android, and just have, if you want Java and Python and whatever you want, and you don't have to install it. You don't need admin, all that good stuff. So the idea here is just pretty much point click. I mean, I've had bad carpal here, so this will be kind of a test to how good it is, because I don't even need to really do much of anything. I've got two or three folders of it already extracted here, but no spaces for now in the path, meaning if you have any spaces in the path of the PowerShell script, it might fall over, or it will fall over on its face. So Jambo, I don't know. So save it. You can actually, it doesn't matter what the name of the script is called.
Okay.
Let's go to the folder. That's pretty much it. The only kind of first thing you kind of need to do is, if you're Intel, you want to do the Intel Hexium driver, which allows the faster emulation.
Okay.
And for the emulator. And then if you're AMD, apparently, if you enable Hyper-V and you install this Google driver, you will get the faster acceleration. So either way, the idea is to make this it's kind of idiot-proof, so well, it'll auto escalate, it'll detect your architecture. So when you click the button, it'll actually install the right driver, and it'll ask you for the escalation. But other than the driver itself, once you install the driver for the acceleration, you don't need admin for anything. You can just run it. And I've actually run this on CrowdStrike, and CrowdStrike gives 0 Fs that I'm running this, which is kind of insane that I can essentially create a whole entire development environment, which it's not necessarily exploit tools, but you can pretty much do whatever you want with this script. So it's a horrible, not great UI, but it's
it's just got to work. It's just got to work.
It's got to work. It works for me, and if people want to start using it, then I can start making it more idiot-proof and get rid of some of these buttons. But the idea here is you run it. It doesn't require any extra, PowerShell modules or anything. All these buttons are, what do they call it? I think it's called Studio, or what do you call it? I think it's called like .NET libraries to do the forum stuff, the Visual Studio or Visual Base BV, whatever. So there's several ways to draw buttons, but I just picked the most compatible. But the first thing you do, it'll tell you where your working path is. You just go down the list, and the actual instructions are in there. It's easy as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 6, 4, 7. So
your number system is way different than mine.
Yeah, and that's why I can't do more. I can make it more idiot-proof. I could probably get it down to like a handful of buttons, but with this, where I'm at now, it works. And if people want to actually use it, then I'll start like making it more error checky, idiot-proof. But I'm not going to spend another week, writing code for something that like 4 people actually run. So the idea is to get people using it and running it, and I can make it easier for other people, even easier down the street. Error checking.
So you have 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you go 5, 4, 6, 4, 7, 4.
Yeah.
I'm like 5, 4, 6, 4, 7. Okay, I understand. So why do you need to start it every time? Why do you need to start AVD every time in that respect?
So the idea is once you do that sequence of numbers, once you get to the point where you've got to be this environment setup that you want, you would just start it. So you would run 4. You would never really need to run anything else unless you wanted to do like some command line stuff or ADB cell stuff. So once you get it running, all you got to do is start it and then press 4, or you can start the emulator yourself. But initially, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which I could expand on the kind of my horrible documentation. That
Yeah.
and then the video, I have a video down here too that'll kind of walk you through how the setup is. So the buttons will move around or be removed
Okay.
as I work through it, but the video will always kind of follow the steps essentially.
Okay.
So you got
Um,
your driver installed, you're good to go, and go ahead.
yeah, no, that's awesome. So it looks like number 6, you have to have, is a prerequisite, you have to have burp installed on
No,
the
this
system.
does everything for you. It pulls down burp, it pulls
Oh,
down
okay.
the community edition of burp, it pulls down
Nice.
OpenJDK.
Nice.
Um,
Frida.
the hard
Yeah.
part was license for Android is like a weird binary string that extracts using zip. So there's like a weird really long binary thing that looks like malware. That looks like a malware
Ah,
payload, but it's actually all the license files for Android, so you don't have to click yes accept.
looks like a base 64 type
Yeah,
thing.
it's a base 64
Oh,
encoded
yeah, there it
zip
is.
file.
Licensed content base 64. Okay. Yeah.
That's the only sketch goofy thing in this whole thing. If somebody was to look at it and be like, "What is this?" But you can see exactly what it does is extracts it into a folder, and
Right.
it's for the licensing to help. So you don't have to click yes or any of that stuff. So that's what this
Okay.
does. Our first step.
So one license will work for thousands of people, or will you have to put in your own 64?
They're essentially using this. I actually pulled this off of Microsoft's website that they use for
really?
like
Okay.
their GitHub. That's how I found this. It was on their GitHub, and they were using 7-zip. I'm like, why are you using 7-zip? It's a regular zip file. So
Right.
I just using their own extractor.
Okay.
So it's like, why would the Windows folks like use 7-zip to extract a zip file that they know they can, call expand archive? So I don't know.
Yeah, it's really weird.
I happenstance upon trying to automate the license, hit yes, and they kind of made it so you actually had to press the Y key. And then I found out that, if you extract the files into the folder, it'll kind of automatically accept the license. So by running this line, you're accepting the license, right? So
okay.
It's not anything that's, like I said, if you Google that this, you'll find Microsoft's like GitHub, which is kind of funny.
Okay.
So that's what mostly this button does.
So what will this work with all versions, including the new Android 13? Or
this whole environment is working Play Store and Android 11.
Okay.
Or 3.0 whatever API, and then Android 11. So with that, real quickly, we've already we downloaded the Android command line tools. We've extracted it. We've downloaded OpenJDK. We've downloaded Python, the NuGet version, which is a lot better. If you're going to install Python, use the NuGet package because it's just binaries, and you don't have to extract the MSI that's inside of a nested MSI that's inside of a nested MSI. So if you're looking for an easy way to install Python, use the NuGet package, which is a cool package manager thing.
Okay.
So it extracts that. It sets up the environment variables more or less correctly. So it does that, and it installs Frida and objection for Python, and also Python XZ module, which will extract the binary that Frida uses on the actual Android emulator, so it can extract it because it's not a normal zip file. The binary that Frida gives you. Everybody's saying use WinZip, or use 7-zip to extract this binary for Android in Frida. And I don't know why they use this XZ. I guess it's kind of a embedded device compression, common embedded device compression. But it's a pain in the butt to work with because nothing will extract it except like 7-zip, and apparently a few handful of other modules, and I wanted to find the most native way to do all this. So in the
Right.
background, it's downloading the platform tools, which you talked about, which is the ADB stuff. It's downloading the Android 11, it's downloading the emulator, and it's downloading the x86 with all the Google Play and stuff already all working.
Nice. Nice.
Um, so
Yeah, and so the Android 11 will pretty much run on anything. I mean, there's a I can't imagine that there's a system that won't work with Android 11 these days. Or most of the things in the Play Store will run on the most latest versions. So that makes a lot of sense. I think the biggest issue, we actually logged it as a finding that it would run on a jailbroken device, or it wouldn't run on a, the app runs on jailbroken devices, which we considered to be an issue. But have you had any issues with any app running on your setup? Like, could you run Pokemon Go and be a user of Pokemon without it going, hey, we've noticed you're jailbroken? Or Fortnite, somebody mentioned Fortnite. Could you run Fortnite on this? How stable is this in terms of just running things and or getting around? You mentioned Magisk, so this is definitely jailbroken. What do you have to do to fix it if a fix comes out that Android figures out how to get around this latest version of Magisk? What does it take? Does it just take rerunning this or waiting for Magisk to update?
Yeah, I don't know how like Nox and all of the gross, specifically gaming ones do it. I know they're running Oreo, but they're doing all kinds of magic to make. I feel like they're doing all kinds of magic to make those run. I would almost have to assume that they're running their own like APK. So when you download like Clash of Clans from Nox, it's not the actual Clash of Clans that's offered by Nox, because that emulator is like Oreo from, I don't know when they stopped doing Oreo, so it's like forever old. So there's some magic going on. I don't know if they're doing and loading more recent compression algorithm. It's very popular with the Unix Linux community. Okay. Yeah, 10% 10 to 15% smaller files, but if it takes me 100% more time to extract it, I don't think I'm losing a lot of ground there.
Exactly.
Especially when these devices have like they ship with like 256 gigs now, right? But I see you on
I'm cheap. I'm cheap. I only have 128 gigs in mine. I'm cheap.
Only.
Only.
Yeah, that's like 4 minutes of 4K or whatever the phones have now, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
4 seconds.
Yep.
The second would be this. The second step would be this Haxium thing. And I don't think you have to reboot, but you might need to reboot in that case. But generally, I would try to have this step done before you start. So like right now we've got Python. Right now we have a valid Python environment. We got Java. Like without doing anything, this is all legit. This is all whatever. We have a valid, we have a valid Java, which I don't know how to do the version. Anyways, we have Java and we have Python. I don't know how to do that. But anyways, with doing this first step, we have like a portable Python and Java environment. But we'll go to so assuming we've got the Haxium stuff, all the acceleration set up either for AMD, we'll do the start burp suite. So what this does is it pulls down burp suite and the latest kind of community. It'll pull down the latest community edition. There's a cool one-liner in here that will download like the latest GitHub of any URL. So that one's kind of cool to run. This little one-liner will download the latest release of any GitHub URL you post, which is kind of
nice.
Cool.
Okay.
There's a lot of cool little tricks in here that I'll kind of talk about as I go through. We're starting Burp Suite now. This is the part that listens to the traffic. This is the proxy, right? It's kind of the de facto standard of web app or testing. I'll make sure the interceptor's off. So now we're ready to like inspect traffic at this point. We got the listener running. We're ready to go. So I'll usually kind of minimize this. I'll leave the history window open.
Yeah.
So right
So
now we have
how's networking working with this? Is this going to be emulated through a socket? Does it create like a virtual? Is it using like the Wi-Fi drivers on your? Is it
no.
creating like
It's when
a?
you start the emulator with the Android emulator, you can pass parameters to it to use a proxy when you
Okay.
start it. There's also ways to switch it using ADB, which I'm not I haven't experimented with yet. And then there's also like the drop down and like manually click. There's a way to do it in Android or ADB where you can switch the proxy on and off, but I'm not 100% sure that's worked for me.
Yeah.
And the advantage with doing it this method is if the proxy isn't running, then the Android device will just start up and
Yeah.
say, oh, the proxy's not there. I'm just going to do normal traffic. So it makes
Yep.
it a little bit easier to like, if its proxy's not up, it'll just start normally and you won't
Okay.
be able to see the traffic going through. But as long
Okay.
as the socket's listening, the Android device will pick it up and say, ooh, I see you set a proxy setting. It looks like I can talk to it and it will start using it. So
Yeah.
if Burp Suite's on, it will proxy the traffic. If it's off, it won't. So it kind of makes it kind of kind of idiot proof in that way.
Yeah. So, Bloodbound asked a couple of questions. Could you connect Wi-Fi adapters or any Bluetooth related items to this? And I'm going to go further because if you're emulating this, you should be able to connect storage, connect other peripherals, maybe?
I do not know anything about the Android emulator. I know that it is um, a hacked up. What's the name of the emulator? Um, QEMU.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
hacked up QEMU with a bunch of wrappers and magical DLLs that do stuff like.
Okay.
I think you can even do. I know with Android Studio you can call the camera, and you can have like
Yeah.
a virtual environment to walk around, and you can throw barcodes up on that virtual
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah.
All kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah. All kinds of peripherals. Yeah. I could definitely see that. So, yeah, Bloodbound, if he uses QEMU, I would hope you could just go in and modify the command line or what have you to add additional things. I know you can, add space and storage. But yeah, if you wanted to add any USB related items, or if you've got a camera like a webcam or something, you might anything UVC. I think if it's a Linux,
I want to do barcode stuff. Yeah, I want to
or barcode stuff or facial recognition or whatever,
so that I can feed it barcodes,
right,
or feed it some kind of image, static image, or a video file to the emulator, so that it can do some kind of. Because I was at a conference and I made a script that clicked all the barcodes at all the vendors at once. So once it started, there's a little window that pops up, and it basically tells you once Burp is running and listening, then you click this OK button, and it'll kind of skip to the next part, which pulls down the certificate. So when you set up Burp Suite, whatever you use as a client, you have to generally take that certificate and push it to whatever you want to inspect traffic to. So what this does is it basically just uses PowerShell to pull the certificate down. So now you have right here, we have our certificate. Here's all the files we've got pulled down so far. As we're all, all our JDK and Python, everything is in this one folder. We're kind of getting closer to actually running stuff. So we've pulled that certificate down. Now we're kind of ready to go to the next step, which is 4.
Cool.
So right now we're starting the emulator for the first time. And this is when I talked about the QEMU part. It's like got all this extra stuff on the side here. You can change you get most of the functionality of Android Studio, but there's some stuff missing in here that's not in Android Studio. So specifically the camera virtualization stuff, but you get a lot of the features that you would traditionally need when you're testing stuff. I want to do automatic backups and snapshots and figure out how that works, but I got to figure out how that works in relation to the Magic stuff and root and system. So right now we pretty much have a there's no Magics, there's no root, there's nothing weird going on here. Everything is legit right now. When you start getting into this next step 5 is when you're actually installing Magics and using the root AVD tool, which begrudgingly, I spent like 2 days trying to get root, and then I realized all I had to use was the root ABD that would automatically patch the images and stuff for you and install Magisk automatically. So I was like, oh, well, I didn't need to do anything. I just need to run Magisk. So like now, we've got Google Play. It's going to complain that, I'm not logged in or anything. But I like to, if I can, just kind of turn off Play Protect and turn off whatever I can. You get sound, you get all the good stuff. You can log in with actual credentials to like a test Gmail account, which I might do in a second here. But from here, you've got a full environment. You're ready to go. You could do essentially whatever you want without having root.
So Bloodbound's asking about snapshots, like a save state or something like that, where we'll.
That's the idea. Is I want people to easily be able to, back up and restore without having to completely roll everything back. So that would be nice, but I don't know how that works when you have root and you can write to system, because I think system image file is written somewhere outside of the user space. So in this folder is where all your goodies are.
Okay.
And I don't know if here's your QEMU. This is the user data. So if you delete this, it basically kind of wipes the phone and bricks it.
Yeah, and the QCal files are the various image container files, kind of like a VXD or a VMDX file in VMware. So it's a container file for that. So
it looks like a weird encoded wonky thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's little things like it's not truly portable because this is a static. Some of this, there's static paths in here and there's static paths in the INI file. So that's something I could work on to make this actually dynamically, depending on where you're working out of, it would change this path to be the right path or make it more portable. But right now it's pretty set up as good as it can be. So we have a legit thing. Then now we start to get into the kind of shenanigans where we're going to run this root ABD tool, which will automatically download root ABD, patch the system image, and install Magisk for you.
So up until this step, we're completely legitimate, legal version of Android, and now we're fugitives from justice with the black helicopters because now we're.
No, I mean, you can do all this stuff in here in the root ABD tool manually, without having Magisks, but I don't see why you would do that, because you're gonna have to install some kind of anti-root detection anyways if you're gonna run any kind of app. So you're kind of forced to run something like Magisk to work around any of that, unless you want to crack open every single APK and start rummaging through functions till the end of the day till you remove all of the root detection.
Right.
So if it's work, Magisk will actually, the script will actually shut down the emulator. And that's when you move to the 6th step. And if you get anything like this says like, and here if it says like device unauthorized, that's when you kind of have to do like a reset or kind of start from scratch. But every once in a while you'll get device offline, or it'll say unauthorized. And it's basically whenever you plug a USB into your phone and you have that allow, it'll say, would you like to, allow USB debugging? For some reason or another, the UI gets screwed up or something happens with the image, and it essentially kind of says no, and it refuses to let you like click it fast enough. But other than that, but pretty standard, good to go. The 6th step has to be run when you're actually starting. When it's actually running. So that's why I have 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
That's why I go step 5 and then back to 4, because you have to run 4 to start the image back up.
Okay, so you have to install Magisk, then start AVD, then register your burp.pem file back as so that's why you have to do it each time. Okay. That makes sense. That works. So, doing them out of order means that something's not going to work right. So read the instructions, make sure you're doing what's necessary. What's the software license? As is, no warranty, no guarantee that it's going to screw up. And Yeah. So there.
Actually, might even have broken it. It looks like.
But you can just delete the directory and start over again, right?
Yeah, it might have to do with my trying to fix. No, this is all standard stuff. I don't know what the deal is. Here, we'll do this again.
So Bloodbound says, I have an idea for iOS where for legal work around this, one physical working iPhone per license to emulate what's on your phone, or say your iPhone, but maybe an experiment of storage. I don't know about what version though. I can imagine do you really need an iPhone? When I worked at CrowdStrike previously, I didn't want to have shit on my phone, my work phone, work stuff on my private phone. So they were like, wow, how are you going to get your 2-factor auth push and your email and how are you going to get your calendars and stuff? And I was like, I'll just buy an iPod Touch. Now I know they've discontinued those, but they'll be around for a few years at least, I would imagine. So there may still be an option. And I don't know how the used iPhone market is, but you don't have to have a cellular connection in your phones. I mean, many as a time I've pulled out my eSIM or unconnected this from the network and just use it as a dumb Wi-Fi device. So there are options out there for folks for testing if they don't want to use Jamboree, but